You've just been summoned to spend the night with the most powerful man in the empire. But instead of passion, you're greeted by silence and a cold line of officials with clipboards. You're not alone. You're not free. And you're certainly not in control. Welcome to the concealed machinery of the Imperial Harem, a system not of silk and seduction, but of surveillance, submission, and statecraft. Hidden within the labyrinthine corridors of the Forbidden City, in the very core of ancient China's most sacred palaces, was a place the world romanticized, but rarely understood. While Western imagination often painted harems as dens of erotic leisure, China's Imperial Harem was anything but indulgent. It was a state-run apparatus designed to control desire, regulate intimacy, and turn private moments into matters of dynastic survival. The emperor's bedchamber wasn't a sanctuary of passion, it was a fortress of protocol. A heavily guarded sanctuary where even the air seemed to obey orders. Behind golden doors, every whisper, glance, and breath followed centuries-old codes enforced by eunuchs trained in discretion and loyalty. Nothing here was spontaneous. Nothing was left to chance. And at the center of it all? Women, concubines, consorts, empresses, not indulging in luxury, but carefully performing roles crafted by dynastic ambition, astrological belief, and fear of betrayal. Far from the myths of freedom and pleasure, the harem operated like a cold bureaucratic machine. Every element of the emperor's most intimate interactions was reduced to regulation, timed, witnessed, recorded. The man who ruled millions was himself bound by invisible threads spun from superstition, tradition, and power politics. His nights were not his own. They were scheduled affairs wrapped in ritual and scrutiny. Each evening played out like a sacred play. After dining on delicacies and reviewing the empire's endless scrolls of court business, the emperor retired to his private quarters. But that retreat marked not the end of duty, merely a shift in its form. Awaiting him was a seemingly simple object, a ceremonial tray. Smooth, dark, and ominously still, this tray was the doorway to a world where politics wore perfume. But this was no mere ornament. It held carved jade plaques, each etched with the name of a woman in the harem, tokens of power and fate, arranged with as much strategy as the pieces on a chessboard. These weren't just names. They were dynastic investments, wombs of potential heirs, tools of alliance or leverage in palace factionalism. To the untrained eye, the emperor's selection might appear spontaneous, almost casual. A simple flip of a plaque, a nod, a glance, the illusion of free will. But behind that gesture was a quiet storm of manipulation. Court advisors and eunuchs with political motives often arranged the plaques to highlight favored names, nudging the emperor toward strategic unions masked as personal desires. Some women spent years cultivating relationships with eunuchs just to ensure their plaques were placed slightly closer to the emperor's hand. Once a plaque was chosen, a chain of events unfolded with military precision, cold, exact, unyielding. The selected concubine was informed instantly. There was no time to prepare emotionally. Her body was not hers now, it was state property. What followed was not romantic anticipation but a rehearsed transformation. She would be immersed in a bath infused with rare blossoms from the south, medicinal roots, aromatic herbs, and oils believed to cleanse not just the skin, but the spirit. These rituals were not acts of self-care, they were offerings. Spiritual sanitization. An attempt to align her body with the stars and purge the shadows of misfortune. After bathing, she was robed in an embroidered silk covering, minimal in material but dense with symbolism. Dragons for power, phoenixes for virtue, blossoms for fertility and prosperity. These symbols weren't decorative, they were declarations. Her hair would be combed to perfection, her skin powdered into an ethereal glow, her scent carefully balanced between floral and mythical. Every blemish was concealed. Every detail rehearsed. She was no longer herself. She was a concept, a vessel for legacy. Before she left her chamber, a eunuch would inspect her, not out of courtesy, but suspicion. No jewelry. No pins. No ornaments. Nothing that could hide poison, blades, or secrets. Even a loose hairpin could be questioned. The emperor's protection superseded everything. Even a decorative hairpiece was viewed as a possible threat. Then came the stretcher. Yes, she would not walk. Instead, she was gently lifted onto a silk-covered platform and carried through the palace like a sacred offering. This wasn't pampering. It was control. Elevating her off the ground ensured she could hide nothing beneath her feet, nor make any unpredictable movements. She became weightless, untouchable, disarmed in every sense. The eunuchs who bore her through the night silence were not mere servants, they were trusted guards of the royal body, castrated not only in flesh but in autonomy. Through dark, hushed corridors they moved, as lantern light flickered against polished stone walls and the wind whispered over lacquered doors. No words. No glances. Just ritualized passage through a world built on shadows, incense, and obedience. Upon arrival, she faced yet another inspection. Even at the door of desire, suspicion lingered. Only when cleared was she gently placed on the imperial bed, motionless, voiceless, waiting. She could not speak unless spoken to. It was a rule carved deep into palace law. The emperor's voice was divine, and hers existed only in response. Time, too, was monitored. The emperor's private time was rarely private. Eunuch stationed just outside would keep strict count, listening for cues, ensuring protocol was never broken. After approximately 1 hour, a soft chime or whisper would be given, a signal that the emperor's duty, or pleasure, had reached its allowed conclusion. If no response came from within, entry was authorized, not to interrupt, but to ensure His Majesty still breathed. When the moment ended, she was once again wrapped in silence and silk, lifted by loyal hands, and returned to her quarters. No lingering. No conversation. No trace left behind. This choreography served one purpose: to prevent any woman from gaining undue intimacy, and thus, too much influence. In a palace where power could be lost with a rumor and gained with a glance, even love, if it existed at all, had to follow the script. The entire process, from bath to bed to banishment back to her quarters, was logged. Documented. Filed. Nothing in the Forbidden City escaped the emperor's bureaucratic gaze. The imperial palace may have been a maze of stone and silk, but beneath its elegance pulsed a machinery of record-keeping so meticulous it would rival the most obsessive modern government. Every name was listed. Every hour accounted for. Every encounter reduced to an entry in a dusty archive. These women were not simply companions, they were royal data points, woven into ledgers that defined the imperial bloodline. Even menstruation was not exempt from this web of control. The moment a concubine began her cycle, she was automatically disqualified from selection, not because of personal comfort, but by the rigid laws of ancient belief. Blood was viewed as unlucky, a pollutant of sacred energy. It was believed that such impurity could disturb the emperor's spiritual balance, his chi, or even invite misfortune upon the realm. So the women developed quiet codes to signal their state: a red silk ribbon tied delicately around the wrist, a discreet gold ring worn on the left hand, or a crimson lantern left glowing outside their chamber doors. But where there are rules, there is always someone willing to break them. Ambition ran deep through the harem, deeper than blood, deeper than fear. Some women, desperate to gain the emperor's favor and elevate their family's standing, chose to hide the truth of their cycles. They masked their symptoms, ignored the taboos, and hoped that fate, or the emperor, would smile upon them. The risk was immense. If caught, the punishment could be exile, imprisonment, or worse. To combat this, eunuchs, already the palace's eyes and ears, were assigned yet another duty: monitoring the bodies of the emperor's women. They tracked menstrual cycles in secret ledgers, observed changes in appetite or energy, and even recorded the scents of herbal infusions used to conceal symptoms. The harem became less a home and more a laboratory, a place where women's lives were dissected, catalogued, and controlled. Behind the silk curtains, it wasn't romance unfolding. It was surveillance disguised as ritual. It wasn't a love story. It was a spreadsheet. And where records thrive, so does jealousy. One woman's rise could trigger 10 others' collapse. To gain the emperor's favor was to step into the spotlight of court politics and into the crosshairs of rivals. Affection became influence. A single knight could secure gifts, estates, or titles for one's family. Entire clans could rise or fall on the back of a whispered rumor or a lingering gaze. Alliances formed in secret. Sabotage disguised itself as etiquette. Poison found its way into teacups. Cosmetic powders were tampered with. Hairpins became weapons. The harem was a war zone draped in embroidery and incense. And when obsession met cruelty, tragedy followed. During the reign of the Jiajing Emperor, whose hunger for Taoist immortality became a palace-wide obsession, the harem was transformed into a human experiment. Believing alchemical potions would prolong his life, he forced concubines to ingest mercury, arsenic, and other divine medicines. They were bathed in noxious mixtures, burned with incense made from rare and toxic ingredients, and treated as vessels of sacred energy. Many became gravely ill. Some died in silence. Eventually, a group of concubines, pushed beyond the brink, conspired to assassinate the emperor. Their plan was bold, but doomed. They failed. Their punishment was brutal. Executions were not only swift but deliberately public, serving as a chilling reminder: no one, not even the women closest to the emperor's skin, could touch him without permission. Their story became a whispered warning, passed from chamber to chamber. The emperor's body was sacred, and to defy him, even in desperation, was to invite death. Yet not all harem stories ended in blood. Some ended in heartbreak. One of the most haunting belonged to Yang Guifei, the favored consort of Emperor Xuanzong of the Tang dynasty. Her beauty was the subject of poems. Her laughter was said to bring joy to the court. But beauty, in the Forbidden City, came with a price. As tensions grew in the empire, whispers turned to accusations. The military blamed her influence for political corruption. Rebellion surged. And under pressure from his advisors and generals, the emperor, heartbroken and torn, agreed to her execution to save his rule. She died in exile, but lived forever in legend. Her story was immortalized in paintings, operas, and scrolls. Not as a traitor, not as a temptress, but as a symbol of the fatal cost of love in a world ruled by strategy. Because in the Forbidden City, even love was dangerous. The rituals of the harem were not built on affection. They were constructed to remind every woman, every official, and even the emperor himself, that intimacy was not an escape from power. It was power. Controlled, restricted, weaponized. Even silk could strangle. Even beauty could betray. And behind every folded plaque and quiet corridor, a truth remained. In the empire's most private room, power did not rest. It watched. History isn't always glorious. Sometimes it's grotesque. Sometimes it's written in blood, silk, and silence. If this story left you stunned, disturbed, or simply curious for more, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and ring the bell so you don't miss the next descent into forgotten corridors of power. And tell me in the comments, which moment shocked you the most, and do you think any of these women ever truly had a choice? Your voice keeps these hidden histories alive, far from the golden walls that tried to silence them.